Buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, completing the process that we started off at the meeting, we started at the beginning of the week talking about the custodians of the Holy Land, talking about it with Father Pizzaballa, what it means being Christians in certain areas of the world. Now, again, covering this circular itinerary, we're basically going back to square one, as we are going to hear again from direct witnesses coming from different corners of the world where being Christians is very much more complicated than elsewhere. So we are closing this meeting again, giving the floor to witnesses of freedom, as the title says. We're going to hear from Paul Bhatti, a friend of the meeting that I'm sure you're all familiar with. His Excellency Msgr Ignatius Kaigama, who is back at the meeting, is the Archbishop of Jos. He comes from Nigeria, where things are extremely complex, at least a situation as difficult as in Baghdad. And then we're going to hear from Monsignor Warduni, who's back to the meeting. And together with us, there's also a friend, a colleague, whom I'm sure you're familiar with, who's Domenico Quirico. So, as I was saying, we're going to hear from the histories coming from different countries to understand what is the interpretation we may come up with nowadays in a world where the experience of faith can become an experience of risking one's own existence. So that's why I'd ask Paul Bhatti to refer to us about his own personal experience. And he is still working along the same lines, but we started off at the meeting showing some images referring to Pope Francis among the two walls, and here you see more images that are sent to us from Pakistan. Shahbaz was Paul's brother. He started off establishing a dialogue with the minorities, stating that religious freedom shouldn't pay any price. And as a matter of fact, he knew he would pay the highest price. And this is how he passed on the baton onto his brother, Paul. So you see basically the meeting he had with Pope Francis. So over to you, Paul Bhatti.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers and congratulate them for choosing such an important topic, which we all need to talk about. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who prayed for us, who supported us materially as we worked in Pakistan to protect the minorities who were persecuted, as we fought against social injustice and against religious discrimination. In particular, I would like to greet my friends from Azione Cattolica, from the Sant'Egidio community, and all those who supported us. Thank you. Now, I'm a physician. I studied in Padua, where I studied medicine and surgery. After a few years as a volunteer, as a voluntary physician in Pakistan, I came back to Italy. Here I worked as a surgeon in a number of hospitals in the Veneto region. Then I became a GP, general practitioner, and I also worked as a private physician. Shahbaz was my younger brother. He dedicated 28 years of his life to the protection of the most vulnerable, to defend Christians who were persecuted in Pakistan. He dedicated his life to fighting against social injustice. During his fight, he was in serious danger many times, and I was very worried about him. He took this decision already when he was 14 years old. So when he was 14, he already decided he wanted to follow his religion and that he wanted to follow the example of Jesus Christ on the cross, because Christians in Pakistan were marginalized, were discriminated against, and very often they were victims of violence, of false accusation. They were innocent victims, and this was very easy because they belonged to a marginalized and poor social group. During his activity, I repeatedly tried to convince him not to continue in this direction, because I was worried for his life. I was worried he could not come back. I wanted him to go back to university, to find himself a job. He promised me that he would study, that he would find himself a job, but he also wanted to continue his activity because he said we thought he shouldn't pursue this political battle, but for him this was a mission. When some Christian victims were falsely accused of blasphemy, now we all heard the story of Asia Bibi, who was falsely accused of blasphemy, and he supported these victims, and he never abandoned his love for the most vulnerable groups, and he never abandoned his love for Jesus Christ and the Christian religion. He defended Asia Bibi. He spoke with one of his dearest friends, the Muslim governor of the Punjab region. Now, Asia Bibi was falsely accused of blasphemy and sentenced to death. I think that Shahbaz was guided by God. He had such a strong belief that led him to continue against all obstacles. This governor was a Muslim fanatic, and yet Shahbaz was able to convince him to support Asia Bibi. And the governor even went to visit Asia Bibi in prison, ignoring the protocol, and he expressed his support for Asia Bibi and the Christian minority. This governor was threatened because of him defending Christians, and a month later, one of his bodyguards was killed. At the time, I was really very worried that Shahbaz may also be victim of an attack. I called him in Italy. I told him we needed him. I was very worried. Of course, I had a strong bond with my brother. And as I was speaking to him, I told him that we wouldn't accept his death. But he replied that he didn't want to die. So I told him, well, then abandon Pakistan, come to Italy or go to Canada, where another brother of ours lived, and he had Canadian citizenship. But he said, I don't want to die, because if you take my mission away, if you prevent me from being able to defending Christians in Pakistan, that would be my death. If you take me away from Pakistan, this would be my death. And I was very moved. I wasn't able to convince him to leave Pakistan, and he actually even convinced me to go back to Pakistan. He called me and told me that I should go back to Pakistan. I smiled, and I told him that I was doing well here. And I asked him, how do you dare to call your brother and invite him to leave heaven to go to hell? And he told me, well, the road to paradise goes through Pakistan. But that was his faith. He never gave up. He knew that he was risking his life. But as his spiritual writings show, he was clearly ready also to die, but he was not ready to abandon his battle, his fight. He was not ready to abandon his religion, and that's what he did, both in theory and in practice. When I received the news we all feared, he's being murdered from terrorists, in the morning I received news that he had been killed as he was going out, as he was leaving home to go to a meeting of the cabinet. I was shocked when I received the information. I reacted saying that this country doesn't deserve anything. I don't want to have anything else to do with Pakistan, so I just left to go to Pakistan and participate in the funeral. Then I saw Christians asking themselves, so what will happen to us Christians now that Shahbaz is dead? They were asking government to continue to protect them. But this was not a matter of protecting Christians, but a matter of protecting all Pakistanis, of guaranteeing interfaith dialogue. So when I received the proposal to continue Shahbaz's work, I was very hesitant. I think there was a superior force that convinced me. So I had two possibilities, either to come back to Italy and continue to work as a GP, or continue the mission of my brother, accept all the threats, and I don't even know how I came to the decision, but I think there was some force from above that led me to decide to remain in Pakistan, to continue the mission of my brother. After 4 years in Pakistan, when I look back, I think I would make the same decision. I've been a successful physician. I've had a decent social life. But I'm confident that I've never felt so happy as I am now in continuing the mission of my brother. I have recently met Pope Francis, and he also told me that Christians need to be united today. We share a common belief, we have a common ideology, a common faith that frees us from all forms of slavery, which weak men tend to and women tend to have. I think that if you profess your religion, you won't be scared of anything, even of dangerous situations, because no threat weakens them. And this is what my brother was telling me, and I didn't believe him. But since I began to follow his footsteps, I realized that someone who strongly professes their religion then feels more encouraged, and these people can then win over their fears. Today, the world, in particular the Christian world, are facing thousands of very serious problems, such as the persecution of Christians. In Pakistan, the situation is particularly worrying in Iraq, then in Nigeria, in Sudan. When I'm invited to speak in front of the international community, I'm asked what we can do to prevent such violence. What can be done? Well, first of all, I believe we need to be united in our faith. We must be aware of the existence of the problem, that these persecuted Christians need our support. All this doesn't mean that we have to take a stance against another religion. There is a complex, radical ideology that has nothing to do with religion. Religion is only used as an excuse, so to say. But actually there are more complex key elements at the basis of these movements. There are thousands of children who are literally brainwashed in schools. In a way, they are educated in such a way that their only ideal of life is either to live or kill in the name of religion. These children grow up with this ideology. When we see a suicide bomber, then we are worried, we are angry, but actually these children are also victims of this ideology, and they need our support, need our help. So it is not enough to save Asia Bibi. Of course, it is important to save persecuted Christians, but we also have to stop this ideology, especially when the human rights, the most essential human rights of children are being violated, using religion only as an excuse, because actually no religion teaches believers to kill in the name of religion. So I think that we should unite all of us to try to save these children, to stop this kind of education that is destroying these innocent children and which is extremely detrimental to society. And Muslims also need our help, because Muslim religion also has a number of wonderful examples. I've told about the governor of the Punjab region, and there have been many situations in which Christians were being persecuted and they received the support of Muslims. This has also happened in Pakistan. I've seen ministers in Pakistan support Christians. Last time I came to the meeting of Rimini, I told the story of a 14-year-old girl who was accused of blasphemy, and at that time, on that occasion, I asked for the help of an imam in a mosque, I was able to convince him, and he accepted to defend this young girl, and this clearly was an example of interfaith dialogue, of harmony. In conclusion, I'd like to say that there have been many cases in which I could find the possibility to promote inter-religious dialogue. So clearly, we need to work not only on school education, but on the upbringing of children. Then, of course, we need to fight against poverty. This is another important element. And finally, I'd like to add that we, as Christians, as people of good faith, must unite our efforts to defend the basic rights of all human beings. We must defend, protect the children who are victims of a fundamentalist ideology. We must unite our prayers to bring peace everywhere in the world, because this is our global responsibility, because peace is a right for everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Paul Bhatti, for telling us about this choice of a difficult freedom when his brother Shahbaz was telling you to come to Pakistan. You felt that this wasn't the right thing to do, but then you changed your mind. So this clearly shows that it is also very difficult to engage oneself the first person. Now I'd like to show some other pictures to take you somewhere else in the world where the challenges are also very difficult. Here you see His Excellency Monsignor Kaigama visiting the city of Jos, and you see that he meets the other communities, not just the Christian community, in the attempt of finding a common language to overcome the barriers of fundamentalism. Boko Haram is the group that is committing these horrible crimes, and this group is making the life of Christians extremely difficult. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Yes. I am very happy to be back to Rimini, to this wonderful encounter, and I thank the organizers for inviting me. I wish to reflect on the freedom of religion in Nigeria. The President of the US once summed up that the situation in the world is depressing. I agree with him. But there are other things that make us greatly depressed, especially when we know that people are trying to expel God from the world. God is given secondary place. God, instead of being numero uno, is given the back seat. But I know that we will not allow this to happen. You that are gathered here are men and women of great faith. The power of faith and friendship will overcome. I always tell people, if you want to see the personification of faith and friendship, come to the meeting in Rimini. We must. We cannot succumb to pessimism. or to the whims and caprices of perpetrators of evil. We must overcome evil with good. And friendship, which is the dominant theme of this gathering, is a powerful weapon that can defeat evil in the world as long as we are bound together. Now, religious freedom in Nigeria is enshrined in our constitution. If you ask a northern Muslim whether his religious rights are being infringed upon, he will tell you, yeah, my religious rights are not being respected because in the south, where the majority is Christian, they are not allowed to build mosques. Neither can they have their children educated in the schools in Islamic religious knowledge. When I led a delegation of the Catholic bishops to our president, I also had cause to worry about certain things. For instance, in the northern part of Nigeria, there is the denial of certificate to build churches. It is very difficult to acquire land in order to build a church. Yes, the teaching of Christian religious knowledge is not allowed in most, if not all, the schools in the core north. On radio or on television, they don't allow programs that are Christian. Yes, and then some people who are from the north but are not Muslims, there is a specific tribe called Maguzawa. They are not allowed to get into school or become gainfully employed. So there is not persecution as such, but severe discrimination. I will later talk about persecution in the real sense. But there are areas that we Muslims and Christians must work together. The issue of conversion. Somebody converts from Islam to Christianity, he or she is persecuted or threatened with death. Marriage also is one area. The Muslims believe that a Muslim man can marry a Christian woman, but a Christian man cannot marry a Muslim woman. So this creates a lot of difficulties. Recently, a lady who is the daughter of a pastor converted to Islam and was to be married in the Islamic way. Naturally, the family is very angry about it. But what we are saying is, if the Muslims can accept Christian ladies to become their wives, why would it not be the same when their daughters want to marry Christians? Why do they have to threaten them or even kill them? There should be equality. Also, an area that disturbs us is the imposition of traditional rulers. I knew a catechist who was under severe pressure to change from Catholicism to Islam in order to merit the crown of a chief. Imagine a Catholic catechist has to become a Muslim in order to become a chief. When he died, his son also was forced to change from the Catholic Church into Islam. This causes a lot of confusion, tension, anger, and all. Even among the security agents, there is division based on religious lines. Like I said, access to land to build places of worship, access to the media, and even chaplaincies in the schools in the north, where our children can be taught Christian knowledge and they can conduct their services. All these are denied. And in the government, where you have those in high positions, there is partiality in appointment. Above all, there is polarization. You can see in some places that Muslims live one side and Christians live on another side. So there is no unity. Now, I want to talk about Boko Haram. I'm sure you are all eager to know about it. Wherever I have been recently and I was introduced as a Nigerian, the first question is, how is Boko Haram? I jokingly say I did not have breakfast with Boko Haram. But Boko Haram is real. The impact of Boko Haram is felt only after their members have committed atrocities. And they continue to grow, to expand, and progressively become sophisticated. They continue to conquer villages and towns. And I think they make the news often. That is why wherever I go, the subject matter on table at recreation is Boko Haram. Arriving in Rome at a lodging, sitting down for a meal, the first question is like a missile. How is Boko Haram? At Malta, during a conference, a man saw my name tag on my chest and observing that I was from Nigeria, shouted, "Oh la la, Boko Haram." In another European country, we visited an enclosed order of nuns. And the first question was, how are the girls? That is the girls that have been kidnapped. For over 3 months now, they are in captivity. I can give you a litany of different atrocities committed by Boko Haram. There are too many to mention. The recent disturbing one is when the leader of Boko Haram has decided to proclaim an Islamic caliphate. That they don't believe in Nigeria, they have to have their own caliphate. And this is causing quite a terrible problem. Even though the government denies that they are not able to do that, but we feel the way they are going, they can cause a lot of havoc. My colleague, a bishop of Maiduguri diocese, where Boko Haram is concentrated, is a man of great faith and courage. He and his priests, their parishes continue to diminish. The minor seminary was attacked, destroyed, and is now shut. The convent of the Augustinian sisters and their clinic have been vandalized, and the sisters have relocated elsewhere. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria have declared Maiduguri a pastoral disaster area, and we try to give moral, spiritual, and limited material support. Maiduguri Diocese bears the brunt of the terrorist attacks more than any other group. The activities of Boko Haram continue to progress, to expand. Even women, young girls are involved now. They carry explosives on their body, and you don't know when they can explode. Bombs go off in different places, Kanu or Kaduna. The kidnap of the Chibok girls is well known to you. Yes, and the girls are still not found. Yes, the Nigerian government and the international community must be able to stop this only if they can block the source of income, the supply of equipment, and other things that Boko Haram brings. It has been observed that there is a disconnect between the ruling party and the opposition. And this gives room for Boko Haram to spread and to cause more damage. It is not all bad news after all. There are certain developments that give us hope. For instance, because of Boko Haram, now Christians and Muslims who are moderate are able to come together to strategize on how to prevent Boko Haram from further destroying Nigeria. The Archdiocese of Jos, where I'm the head, we promote different initiatives. We have that school for Muslim and Christian youth, training them in peace building, dialogue, culture of dialogue, and vocational skills. We also teach them for 2 years to stay together, and when they go out, they become ambassadors of peace. We have the Dialogue Center where we are holding proactive meetings and initiatives for peace. As a sign that we are succeeding, recently we organized a launching for our new Catholic Cathedral, and the Emir of Wase, a big Islamic Emir, and another Emir were present at the launching. And they also donated money towards the building of a Catholic cathedral. Yes, so it means that even despite the difficulties, we continue to work. But we depend on our authorities to do whatever they can do, apart from talking. Because most times they say we are on top of the situation. They say, oh, the time for Boko Haram is up. And they will say, oh, we know where the girls who are kidnapped are. Why not bring them back if you know where they are? We also believe that with proper equipment, good training, and good motivation, the security agents can bring about the release of all those who have been captured. I will conclude by telling you that in Nigeria there are 3 levels of religious problems. The first one is the ordinary level, where between the Muslim and the Christian there is a natural distrust, fear, and suspicion. The second one is the one introduced by Boko Haram. It is violent and destructive. And this is what we are hoping to overcome. The third one is the mixing of religion and politics. It creates problems and it can actually lead to the disintegration of the nation. There are 2 main bodies for the Christians and the Muslims in Nigeria that should be working towards the unity and harmony of these different religions. But unfortunately, these 2 groups seem to be always confronting one another in a negative manner. There is no doubt that the activities of Boko Haram have created more distrust, fear, and suspicion, and a crisis of relationship between Christians and Muslims. Now, instead of talking about fighting Boko Haram, we are appealing to them to be human, to be rational, and to stop the terrible destruction. For God's sake, when you hear their leader, Abubakar Shekau, urging his group, gentlemen, kill Christians, it's very frightening. So to Shekau, we appeal in the spirit of Jeremiah chapter 22, no more violence, shed blood no more. And we say release the girls unharmed. When asked in an interview whether I feel threatened or I am afraid of my life, I responded that it is natural to be afraid. But my conviction in promoting the culture of peace and dialogue and the unity of humanity is inspired by my Christian conviction that once there is uncompromising faith in Christ, there is hope of overcoming evil. On my own part, looking up to Christ, I plan no evil, I encourage no evil, and I support no evil. But I simply go on doing my work as a priest. One cannot agree more with Richard Nixon, the late American president, who said, always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them, and then you destroy yourself. Please, my brothers and sisters, continue to pray while applying political pressure on your governments to contribute to the end of terrorism by misguided religious adherents. And above all, for the immediate liberation of our almost 300 beloved girls who so far have spent brutal moments, days and months in captivity. Thank you for listening.
Grazie a Monsignor Kaigama.
Thank you to Monsignor Kaigama.
Grazie Monsignore. I'm afraid you have to go.
Yes.
Monsignor Kaigama ci saluta in anticipo.
Monsignor Kaigama unfortunately has to leave because he has to go back to Nigeria immediately. So I think that we shall put our hands together again for Monsignor Kaigama. Thank you.
Ecco, ci porta ancora una volta dentro nel cuore dell'argomento.
We're now going to hear again about another subject. Paul Bhatti earlier on said something very, very important in order to understand, to provide some kind of interpretation to what surrounds us. He referred to the things that are happening at the present point in time. Paul at some stage said, there are people who are animated by radical philosophy, religion being just but a pretext. So there's nothing truly religious in the way they act and think. Then I'd like to refer now or address Domenico Quirico. Domenico Quirico had a very, very hard experience. As you all probably know, he had to face up with that folly that urges men to become something different from mankind. We did it with the other speakers. We're going to do the same with Domenico. So let us see together some images, some snapshots, some images of Syria that are losing forever their identity because the war is being fought, because there are armed men all over, because children are getting killed, because the roof is no longer a shelter, but it's just a surface whereby people can kill you and everybody's forced to flee. This is the new rational, this is the new truth for large areas in the Middle East. This is the new truism for Syria, where Domenico Quirico was and where he paid for wanting to see things from within. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start commenting on one of the snapshots that you just saw on the screen behind me. I believe that no other snapshot can be telling. Actually, there are a million of pictures that we've seen about the civilian war in Syria, but I think that none but the one that you saw first provides us with the best image of what has been happening and what is happening at the moment and what has been happening for the last 4 years at least. And just to expand over the past 4 years. This is a snapshot by a photographer from Turin in Aleppo. Here there's no bloodshed, there's no dead people, and 200,000 people got killed here. 200,000 people. This might seem just as a normal picture. There's an old lady that went to buy some bread and who's walking in against this backdrop of rumbles, a total catastrophe, concrete that has been bombed by airplanes, by all weapons. What is the very essence of this photograph? Well, it is in the daily nature of pain. So blood is and pain is the daily routine of for the 22 million people of people that still live in Syria. 4 million people have fled Syria. So the daily nature of suffering is, again, the main feature. So every second, every moment of their lives is a meeting up with bloodshed, with violence, with destruction. This is the tragedy of Syria. Now, I'd like to go back to a sentence that is written at the end of this whole toward the ends of the world, toward the ends of the earth. Destiny has not let men alone. Well, I don't know about destiny, but unfortunately, the Western world, Europe, the US, we did leave man alone. We did leave that old lady by herself. We did leave the other 22 million people in Syria alone. We did leave the Christians in Iraq alone. We did leave the Christians in the North Nigeria alone. We did leave the people in Rwanda alone some over 20 years ago. So we've left people living at the ends of the earth alone, and this is our sin. This is our sin. There's a story that I wish to write. Probably they will never let me because my people might not be interested, but I wish I could tell how I image how it could be if I could go back to Syria tomorrow. And this is something that I strongly desire, not as a journalist, but as a human being. I've crossed the country for small amounts of time, 5 times. Unfortunately, the last time my stay was a bit longer. And I wish to tell my encounter with the revolutionary young people in Syria, but not referring to the fanaticists of the different movements, to those of the jihad. I'm not talking about then. I was thinking about the young students, the civil society, as we term them, that just wanted one thing, i.e. the doing away with a corrupt government, that of Bashar Assad. And I just dream what I could write in that story, what those young people would tell me if I could meet them again, maybe tomorrow, maybe now, 4 years away from the time I went to Aleppo for the first time. I went there when the revolution had just started off and half of the city was in the hands and there were ruins all over. But the revolution which is now on is not the same as the one that started off. There's a young vet who was maybe 25 then, and he was working as a surgeon. He was a veterinary, but he was used to dealing with donkeys, cows, and he was working as a surgeon in one of the hospitals in Aleppo where I stayed, because there were too many people with wounds, too many people about to die, and the doctors, the true doctors, were not enough. And one day he took me to the border with Turkey, and the ambulance, there was a young fighter who had died on his way to the border, and he said, I'd like to refer to you about an old Arabic proverb: mountains remain away one from the other, but men can come closer one to another. This is what they're made for. So after 4 years, what can I tell these men now that the revolution has been totally done away with because of our own faults? So I could say, you know, you are right. You were right when you said that you in the West, he was talking to me, and you said, you don't care about what is happening to us in Syria. You don't care for us risking our lives. You write many things in your constitution. There are things that you pay lip service to on your papers. Your politicians always talk about doing away with dictatorship, democracy, and so on and so forth. But as a matter of fact, you don't care for that a bit. You in the West don't care for what happens to us a bit. Your friend is and was Bashar Assad. And what I could tell this guy, well, I would have said, you're right. 4 years away from the time when I met this guy, we are helping Bashar Assad. We are providing him with information. Perhaps we're going to support his aviation to destroy what is still there, the little that is still there of the revolution that started off 4 years ago. So that a friend of mine is not there anymore, and I cannot talk to him any longer because the hospital was bombed by the artillery of Bashar Assad. And us in the West were not looking at those men, at that man. We were not looking. And the hospital, again, was destroyed, and my friend died. I could tell that there's another doctor that had stayed on working at the hospital, despite the threat that was issued for all the doctors. They were indeed threatened that their relatives would be killed, and the doctor had stayed on in the hospital all the same. And he would tell me, we are fighting day by day, but it's very hard. We're just by ourselves. We are by ourselves. They have left us alone. And then we read your book. So we are not Islamists. I go to the mosque. We go to the mosque with discipline. I am a good Muslim, but I'm not a fanaticist. And why do you say that it is us that are Islamists and you cannot help us? So he has died as well. So I couldn't help him. I cannot help him. So I might find also those fanaticists of the new caliphate if I went to Syria today. My job for the last 20 years have been that of stubbornly going to the land of evil. I started off with a bloodshed, Mozambique. You might not remember. Well, Mozambique was the place where evil was acting through ideology. There were Marxists against the others. And then there was the evil of tribes, Rwanda and Somalia. And then I got to the end of this long journey in Iraq and Syria and the new caliphate. So to reply to the answer that was asked earlier on, what is happening there? Well, what is happening there is something terrible, something that we are not aware of, or we are not fully aware of at least. We are not witnessing the birth of the dictatorship. We are witnessing a new totalitarianism, and that has been the most terrible experience of the previous century. Totalitarianism is not dictatorship, it is the denial of the other as such. The obligation for everybody to be done away with altogether so as to cleanse the society, not because there's anything to be blamed to the other, not because it is a dissident, not because it is a revolutionary, but just because it is somebody other, because it is Jew, because it's a Tutsi, because it's a member of the other group, because it might be the Christian for the Islamist. So basically, you want to cleanse the society, doing away, killing all those who contaminate the purity. This is what is happening in the new caliphate that has been established between Iraq and Syria. And not just there, though, because we shan't forget that these are the other areas such as the north of Nigeria, Sahel, Libya, Afghanistan, Yemen. So the eternal Leviathan, be that Nazism, totalitarianism of the communists, implies the doing away with the other, with your neighbor. Think about James Foley, an American journalist that has been killed and beheaded. He hasn't been killed because he had witnessed something or because he had written something that the people did not approve of. Foley has been sentenced to death as soon as he fell into the hands of the jihad, because he's American, because he's a member of the West. This is why he was sentenced, because he was American, because he was from the West, because he was what he is. So basically, your sin is written yourself in your biography, in your what you are. This is the extreme danger that we see exploding in the Near East, in between Syria and Iraq. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you, Domenico, for explaining where what we are talking about comes from, because that moves our hearts, because this is not something that is unavoidable. Now, you would like to write about many stories. For instance, I was talking with Msgr Warduni that I would like to have the opportunity to write about a stroll I could take in the streets of Baghdad, and the bishop has never abandoned Baghdad. So now let's move to Baghdad. Let's watch some pictures of Iraq. We see the bishop walking among his people. Here, this is the way people sleep in some Iraqi houses, and then there are the people who had to escape because the people who had all of those pants, etc., they're simply fleeing from their homes. These are places near the province of Nineveh where these Christians are being cared for, and they receive help. Actually, this no longer exists because the Nineveh province is also the province of origin of Msgr Warduni. I didn't know about that. I only recently read it in a biography. And well, that province, the Nineveh province, has now become the place where the self-proclaimed Islamic State, Caliphate, perpetrates its horrible crimes. Now, it is even hard for me to talk about a caliphate or Islamic State, because when we see what they do, it's impossible to associate the kind of things they do with the word state. Today the situation is much, much more complex. Monsignor Warduni, you have the floor. Thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, I would like to bring you all the peace of our brothers and sisters, of all the inhabitants of Iraq, and in particular of Mosul and of the Nineveh province. May the peace of God always be with you. Now, we don't want to make you sad, but we only want to describe you the situation. And how can we all together try to alleviate the situation? Friendship between peoples. What kind of friendship? Witnesses of freedom. What freedom? I remember when the country was occupied by the US forces, Mr. Bush used to talk about freedom, the freedom of Iraqis. And I said, well, you can walk for 5 minutes in the streets of Baghdad and you won't see anyone. So where is freedom? Anyway, a few years ago, there was a Eucharistic Congress, and some of the things that were said there were that the first Christians said that you can't live without Sunday. So, my dear friends, this helps us explain the life of Christians in Iraq, in Mesopotamia, despite all the persecutions they had to go through, or they had to suffer. And now, in Mosul, there is the strangest and most terrible persecution. Christians have been in Iraq since the first century of Christianity, since the time of the apostles, when St. Thomas founded the Chaldean church, then left to India. So Christians are strongly rooted in Mosul. They've been there for 2,000 years, and they kept on living, on professing their religion to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, trusting in the words of God. Don't be scared, small flock. I won over the world. And for this reason, our church is called the Church of Martyrs. And now they want to uproot us from our land. They want our land where the blood of martyrs irrigated, which was irrigated by the blood of martyrs, where a land where our culture lit up the country and its inhabitants, where Hammurabi wrote his laws, where the prophet Jonah shouted to the inhabitants of Nineveh to do penance. Now, I think that now we also need to do penance. We need to go back to God, who will forgive us because He is love. And it is now time to get reconciled with our neighbors in love. Maybe you all wonder how Christians in Iraq are doing. Iraq, the country where the Tigris and the Euphrates flow. My dear friends, all Iraqis are not doing well. They haven't been doing well for many years, and especially in recent months and in recent days. This particularly applies to minorities, among which Christians, who are more than 120,000. More than 120,000 Christians had to abandon the Nineveh plain. Mosul, Nineveh, is a city of culture and science, the mother of two springs. In Mosul there are churches, monasteries, tombs of saints which date back to long before the arrival of the Islam. There have been 2,000 years of Christian history, and yet, since the 10th of June, there is no more Christian prayer in Mosul. Those who cry every Sunday and ask the Lord to be able to come back to their homes and churches, to praise Him and thank Him like they did before, and even better than they did before. This is what has happened in the Nineveh plain. The Imam who founded the Love and Joy Community for the Disabled said, "My Muslim brother looks towards Al-Qibla, that is Mecca, when he prays. My Al-Qibla today is Mosul, which is the place where my church and my home are, the place where my neighbors, my friends, and my Love and Joy Community and my disabled brothers and sisters are." And he goes on. When these things happened, there was strong silence. We didn't know what to say, how to speak. But we had an issue at our hearts. We had a question. God, what are you asking us through these episodes? And after a bit of silence, during which I had the opportunity to listen to Christ, I heard him say, "My friends, my neighbors, my brothers and sisters, don't be scared, don't be afraid. I'm proud of you. Because when you were asked to choose between your property and me, you opted for me. So move forward and don't let anyone uproot faith from your hearts." In these terrible, difficult moments, we don't know what the future will look like. But we will continue to cry with the strength of our faith, and that if they ask us to choose between the love of this world and the cross of Iraq, then we will continue to bear the cross of Iraq, and we will continue to remain in Iraq. And we can hear Jesus thanking us at a time of difficulty. We hear the voice of Christ saying, "Blessed you that are persecuted because of me." Mosul is a city where Christians and Muslims have lived together for hundreds of years. And now these cannibal-like people, now I apologize for using these terms. Now these cannibal-like people come and tell Iraqi Christians who have always lived in Mosul to abandon the cities and their homes. They tell Christians to leave their homes without taking anything, or to become Muslims, or they will be killed. How do they dare to say such things? And why do they say such things? Now, in the 21st century, we hear really strange things. We love everyone. And these are the teachings of our Savior, our God, Jesus Christ. It is a strange and very difficult calamity which gives the shivers. This calamity leaves us speechless, and we are unable to explain it. Where does this catastrophe come from, this deadly catastrophe? And for which reason? Who can help us against this catastrophe? This is the point. No one wants to help us. This is a huge injustice against innocents, against children, against the elderly, against the ill and the most vulnerable. They want to uproot trees. They want to cut cultures from their origins. They want to destroy all the archaeological remains and the manuscripts which represent the treasure of Iraq and of the world. Why do they treat us in such a brutal and inhuman way? We want to know what wrong we did. Our history shows that we've always been honest and good. Our patience is almost over. In the beginning, they arrived as docile lambs. Then they became predatory wolves. First, they said were coming to defend us. Then they began to say, stop with Christians working as officials, as state officials. Then we became Nasara, which means infidels. Then our homes were declared property of Islamic nation. They were no longer our property, but the property of the Islamic nation. Then they began to cry that the Christians had to leave Mosul. What a disaster! Christians prefer to abandon everything than to deny God. And yet, at the borders of their towns, they find armed criminals who seize everything from Christians. They take medicines from a young child and they throw the medicine away. Then they strip a 2-year girl of her earrings. They strip women of their wedding rings. They take the cars. They take everything. And then they leave people walk, even without shoes, under the burning sun with the temperature of 48 degrees Celsius. A week ago, they took a 3-year-old girl from the arms of her mother and father, and her parents said, why are you taking our daughter? Then they behave in a terrible way. They behave in an unprecedented way in our history. They destroy all the wonderful things of our cities, both Christian and Muslim things. The beautiful monument mosque, which was built over a church on the place of Prophet Jonah, of the Prophet Georges. They perpetrate crimes against women. They speak of morals and then they behave immorally. All women had to should come out and make a demonstration because women are being humiliated. These people say they value women, but actually they trample on their basic rights, on their dignity as women. And we say, the wise men understand what this means. Now let's think about the first Christians who preached the gospel, the resurrection of Christ, with the solid faith. And I was fighting to free priests who had been kidnapped. Some people said, aren't you scared? Well, my reply was, why should I be scared? God is with us. Let's just do what we have to do. And it is our duty to serve forever in any circumstance, even if I risk my own life. This is our duty. So, our Christians of Mosul and of the entire Nineveh plain professed their religion, the faith in Christ our God and Savior, steadily, without fear, saying, we believe in Christ and we are ready to die for Him, because dying with dignity is much better than living in humiliation. We are proud of being Christian. My dear friends, sometimes there are things that can't be told. Anyway, These people represent a huge danger for everyone and for the whole world. They represent a threat to humanity. The danger is the danger of a genocide, as you can see. We have been pushed away from our homes, but the Yazidis have been killed. Some of them were buried while they were still alive. Their children died of thirst and malnutrition. Their young men were killed. But the most terrible thing is that their wives and daughters were sold on the markets only for sexual pleasure. What a catastrophe! These women have been maltreated and morally raped. Some of them committed suicide in order to preserve their moral dignity. And they cried and they asked to be bombed in order to be freed from these evil people. This is our daily life. I apologize for telling you such saddening things, but hopefully this will lead us to building a bigger joy. This will lead us to liberate these people. So this is our daily life, a troubled life in which we are humiliated. Our future looks obscure. Thanks to our churches and to the government in the north who have welcomed our brothers and sisters also belonging to other minorities, we have done quite a lot. Now maybe you may ask me, what can we do? Now this is a very correct question which we should ask ourselves, but it is also a demanding one. Governments are making a lot of wonderful promises, but they are doing nothing. Now, we would like to suggest the following. First, take the issue very seriously. Especially the large powers should take things seriously and begin to cooperate in order to uproot the Daesh, the ISIS. Second, don't sell weapons, this dangerous plague. The real problem of war is the sale of arms. When I heard about the Americans being killed in Iraq, well, I always used to say, well, you sold weapons to the dictator, and this is what is leading to our death. Third, we have to punish those who provide weapons. We all know who is selling weapons to these people, but no one is saying anything against it because of the economic interest, because of the oil, etc., etc. So we must exclude these nations, these groups from the international community. Fourth, we want international protection because our people have lost faith in everyone. Because today they go back home, but maybe after 2 to 3 days their fate will look even more dangerous. So we must immediately protect all the minorities, Christians, Yazidis, Shabak, Faili, etc. Fifth, we want our human rights as Christians to be respected. Our rights are being trampled on. Where are those who are in charge of protecting human rights? Where are the United Nations? What are the United Nations doing? Sixth, what is the UN Security Council doing? Either it does something or it should be dissolved. because maybe it is dominated by the powers and it can do nothing. Seventh, if world powers can do anything against some criminals, maybe 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 criminals, if the whole world can't stop these 50,000 criminals, then the law of the jungle will dominate. Homo hominis lupus. Who are they? Where do they come from? Who is supporting them? In the 21st century, we are basically witnessing free war under the protection of the most powerful of oil which is a gift of God. Eighth, we should cry aloud on behalf of all Christians, of all Iraqis, on behalf of poor children, elderly, ill, and women. Feel pity for us. Sow the seeds of peace and of solid morals. Sow the seeds of love for God and neighbor, and this will save the world. Let's cry to Jesus on the cross. Don't abandon us. Let's cry to the Holy Father, and I would like to thank him very much for his constant moral and material support. And on behalf of everyone, I'd like to say, don't abandon us, Your Holiness. I'd like to cry to all the synods of churches around the world, to all the nations around the world, to cooperate together to sow the seeds of peace, love for mankind, and to uproot evil. Finally, you here in the audience, I would like to ask you to support us. God bless you. Let's live with this faith and let's sow the seeds of friendship between people. Then we will witness true freedom. Thank you.
Grazie, Monsignor Warduni.
Thank you, Monsignor Warduni, for clearly showing that this is something true that affects the lives of people. These are things that are happening right now. To close this meeting, you will receive a message of peace from the children of the meeting of Rimini. Now, we have talked about violence, and yet we've also heard that positive messages can help people. And this is what the children of the meeting of Rimini tried to do by collecting money to donate to Iraq. And they left 2,500 messages, and they tied their messages to air balloons. Now, this money will be used to rebuild the market of Baghdad. I would like to quote some of the messages written by these children. Francesco, who is 12 years old, said, smile because God loves you. I will pray for you. Carlo, who is 10 years old, writes, I hope war will be soon over. I hope you won't be killed so you can have fun. So they're even looking towards the future. Caterina wrote the following. Maybe sometimes children can convey very deep messages. I'm looking forward for Christmas to come for you too. And together with Caterina, this is what we would like to wish you. And we hope that moderate Muslims will join the plea you've just made. We hope that your plea will be supported by those who believe that religion is something different, because in such a way for interreligious dialogue to become an additional point of the list you gave. Now the time has come to give the floor to Emilia Guarnieri.
Leggo di mio, vi dico.
What I would like to say is thank you, a big thank you. Year on year, and this year more than any other, I'd like to say thank you for this Christmas, which is forever with us. What are we looking for? And this is the question that Pope Francis raised. We started the meeting with that. The meeting took place in a national and international situation that was extremely dramatic. The ends of the earth are not far away, as the President of the Republic, Giorgio Napolitano, told us in the message that he sent at the beginning of the meeting. As a matter of fact, the ends of the earth are part of our world, a part of our experience, and the tragedies that occur daily in many parts of the world concerns us directly. The meeting this year wished to meet such ends of the earth so as to listen to great witnesses such as Father Pizzabilli, Alexander Filonico, Giorgio Bucasen, and Pantaleimon. The Bishop Warduni, as well as Italian people such as Father Spadaro, President Violante, Professor Mucellati, and other institutional characters such as Minister Poletti and Giannini, the President of the Italian Manufacturing Association, Squinzi, and we met also Sergio Marchionni, and these people had a common thread in that they showed the power of the heart of man who's free and can recognize what is essential. Going towards the end of the world, getting to meet the ends of the earth, is the way we can recognize what is essential. We can experience that important presence without which the real situation wouldn't mean anything. This is what makes us attentive to any aspect of our lives. As every year, many recognize the richness of these days, the richness of this experience, and its value as a contribution to the world. The unity which is experienced here is an important experience for all. This is what a first comer to the meeting told us. The meeting speaks to the heart of any contemporary man with a language which is easily understood, a language that marks the beginning of a new relationship and a history that then goes on. This history sees many key players, 4,000 voluntary workers coming from over 43 countries worldwide, which marks the fact that friendship amongst the people is something true at the meeting. 280 speakers and the curators of the exhibition, so that do not shut up in their silences, but that talk together with young people and amongst themselves, and also the interpreters of the world of the economy that decided to contribute to the making of the meeting. We go back to our homes, to our different countries, over 70, wishing to go on along this road. Certain, as Father Giussani would say, the solution to problems that are raised by the life is not found tackling problems, but that analyzing in depth the very nature of the individual faced with such problems. Hence, the title of the 36th edition of the meeting, to be held between the 23rd and 29th of August 2015, reads as follows. What is the lack? A lack of all heart, of which all of a sudden you are full. So see you all next year.